and welcome to Real Conversations with yours truly, Sheree. This is the show where real life situations create real conversation. And it's a pleasure for me to have on the first episode for today's show, Pastor Leslie Duroseau. Hey, Pastor Leslie.
Hello.
So I decided to ask Pastor Leslie to talk with us about, some of her opinions when it comes to God's calling and purpose. This is a topic of discussion that I know for myself I've had with a lot of my friends at different stages in life. And I think during this particular season, it's something that we all might be thinking about more deeply, especially since we have more time on our hands right now. So, the first question I wanted to ask Pastor Leslie is, what do you think about the phrase God's calling and purpose? Do you think um, a person's calling and their purpose, is it the same definition, would you say?
I would say yes, but I would say that it may show up differently.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by that, do I believe I'm called by God to minister the gospel of Jesus Christ to people?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Does that mean I necessarily needed to be a pastor? Maybe, maybe not. Um, I think my purpose and plan is to be an agent of change here upon the earth. I believe I'm a messenger of light. I believe I am here to be a support to others. And I do believe wholeheartedly that I am here to share the gospel of truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that has found me in the vocation of a reverend, a pastor.
Right.
But I don't think I'm limited to that. I believe that's one of the ways I'm supposed to get the gospel out to people. That's one of the ways that I use to help support and be there for other people.
Mm-hmm.
But I also believe there's calling can be so wide and so big. I think there's very few people in this world that just know from like the beginning, like this is who I'm meant to be. This is what I'm supposed to do. And then they go after with everything in their heart and it lines up just like that. I think most of us, it's a process.
Right.
And sometimes it's like a process of elimination. After I've done all this, oh, now maybe this is what I feel I was always supposed to do, but I didn't have maybe the tools or the resources or the support to be able to do it. Like I'm pretty much a creative arts person.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always just wanted to dance. That
Exactly.
was it. So I had a father who said, I will not pay for you to go to college to learn how to dance.
Mm.
This was back, 80s.
Right.
And so the understanding was for my father is you don't become a professional dancer. Like that's not going to get you anywhere in life.
Yes.
You need to study something more academic. And so I did. But I really felt like my purpose and plan in life was to dance, to be a dancer, to share dance with others. And then look at God. He has me to become the leader of a dance ministry in a church for like over 20 something years.
Right.
So
That's
that's why when you say calling and purpose, I think it's something that we feel like we just, like they say, what's something you would love to do, whether you got paid for it or not.
exactly.
I
Exactly.
would love to be able to teach dance to help people to get closer to their understanding of who they are.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so I'm able to do it in the venue that I am as a pastor, a minister in the church, which works out well for me in many ways. But a lot of it, I feel like, even with that now during, like you said, when I think about really like my purpose, because ministry can take on, again, a different look, a lot of layers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um I think sometimes where you started at doesn't mean that's where you stay at.
Yeah.
It could have been the foundation that you needed and some stepping stones for us along the way.
Mm-hmm.
um but I think one of the key things people always have to do is discern and always allow for your relationship with God to evolve.
And that's, you're saying the word discern, and really tuning in and listening and seeing what's happening around you, what God is showing you through different circumstances. And like you were saying, you might start off doing one thing, but that might not be the particular thing. What do you think are ways that people can kind of tune into how God might be trying to move them in a certain direction in order to discern? Because I feel like that's probably one of the biggest things that most people have trouble with, is discerning, not even just when it comes to figuring out your calling, but with any decision and every decision in life. So how do you think we can tune into figuring out, the Lord is saying, I think I need you to move in this direction?
Right. I really, and I didn't recognize it then, but I think what was one of the best ways that helped me to discern greatly my calling was the confirmation of the community.
Mm.
Having supporters and having community, because a lot of people saw what I didn't see. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people were discerning things about me that I didn't even understand what discernment was really about and what that looked like. I was going to school to become a psychologist.
Wow.
So I have a bachelor's in psychology, and I thought I was going to be going back to school to get a PsyD or something like that. And then it ended up that I end in seminary.
There you
So
go.
I understood that I was going back to school, but I was off with what I was going back to school for. And maybe I could have still went to school, continued my education for psychology, but it was the community of the believers and even some non-believers
Mm-hmm.
who would just say things to me like, you really have a gift of, and you're really good at, and
Gotcha.
something I said, yeah, when they said it, it resonated with me, but I didn't really know where to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in your discernment process, you should definitely surround yourself with key people that love and support you no matter what.
Right.
They're not in for it for any kind of anything. They just know you, they love you, they want to continue to nurture you.
Mm-hmm.
That was the most meaningful for me, because for me, in some ways I was naive, and then maybe just a little too humbled in some ways. Like I was never thinking God was going to call me to be a minister in his church. That didn't resonate with me at all. I don't have any ministers in my family that led the way before me. I'm
Right.
like the first, and female at that. So I didn't really have any models or examples of that within really my local community.
Mm-hmm.
And even I would hear from like people that I knew, like, God is not going to have a woman head his church up.
Mm.
I was like, oh, really? Like, I'm not even that deep. I'm like, I didn't know that was a thing, because I just wasn't really brought up in the church that I thought women can pretty much do whatever they want, but that was a thing.
Wow. Wow.
So it came really from the support and the encouragement from the community and a lot of the spiritual leaders
Mm-hmm.
that helped me to discern that call.
And even touching on having the calling to be a minister, I know that there are people that might feel like they have that calling and aren't sure, or they might be, afraid to step into that. They might feel like, oh, if I do this, this is going to change everything. What would you say to people who feel like they have that as a calling?
Well, what I want people to say is you can be we're all ministers in our own
Exactly.
right.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you're called to be in a church building.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I think for me, that was really the only opportunity that was presented at the time. And so it seemed to align with where God, was having me. And I believe that it did. But I think in this day and age, especially now we have a pandemic where the churches are closed, I
Exactly.
think there's a creative movement taking place that we want to see the gospel get out there. We want to see ministers out there. There are so many people that are doing good and great work,
Mm-hmm.
to lift up God, to lift up the name of Jesus, because there's different faith traditions and backgrounds. I believe God speaks to all in different ways. And so don't think, it definitely means that you're supposed to come and ordain minister or ordained elder or reverend. I don't think it necessarily means that, especially now in these times.
Exactly.
I think
Exactly.
there's a way. I think actually this is an opportunity and a time to become creative, doing things like you're doing.
Yeah.
This is a perfect example of how you're going to educate people, support people, and maybe give them a new lens to look at things and how they understand themselves. And I think more and more of that is going to happen. I think the institution of religion and the church is probably
Mm.
highly overrated in a lot of ways, because people are not coming to the buildings for the most part. Um, and that's fine, but I think they still are seeking after God.
People are
And they,
seeking to God. Yeah.
yeah, and they want God in new and innovative ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what the end of this pandemic is going to bring, is bringing up now. when you look at everybody and what they're doing now, that this is definitely a wave to be more creative. And I think really to join people together across gender, across race, across understanding and everything. Because at the
Right.
end of the day, I think we're realizing we only really have each other.
Right. It's
And doesn't matter what you look like or in many ways what you believe, as long as you're for the greater good, which
right.
is for uplifting of humanity. So
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
that's how I see it.
And so, for people who may be thinking about just going back to, what that particular calling might be, sometimes callings aren't always necessarily things that might be able to provide financial support in the way that you may want. Or sometimes even you might have people around you that, like you were saying, you were told that when you were younger, you know, I think you should go and do this particular job or vocation, probably just for financial, foundation, not
Right.
because you weren't gifted and talented in that, but because for all parents, people are always concerned about money is just
Yeah.
what it is, and finding a way. But people need to also be spiritually fulfilled and do what God is calling them to do, because I definitely believe we all have this purpose in life, and that is to do what that calling is. And I feel like we all, there's always that thing that sometimes we may wrestle with. It's like, but how do I do that? And so for, especially for the, even for the arts, like as like we met through a theater production that you were the director of, and so for artists and people who might have dreams and ideas and callings that aren't necessarily in typical vocations, how do you think in a mindset or positively people can go about working towards that still? Because I think when people don't work towards that thing that God is calling them to do, it's something that they'll always be wrestling with. So how do you think there's a way to balance the two?
And so I'm going to share a little. So when I first was going into ministry, and you're a part of United Methodist Church, so that's a rigorous process. So it's a
Hmm.
process that can probably take like 6 to 8 years.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, I was working as case management and child protective services and office of substance, all these different state organizations doing that work, which can be a way of doing ministry,
Hmm.
right? But it was still something still nagging at me that this was not it all for me. This
Hmm.
this was not it. So that's one part of it.
Hmm.
But the other part of it was it giving me some of that financial foundation that I needed at the time, while I continue to pursue or understand what my purpose and calling was to look like.
Right. Right.
And
Exactly.
so I feel like creative arts people like myself, and maybe you can chime in,
Hmm.
you know, yeah, we wrestle heavily with that financial piece, because we just want to, we're like free spirits in a lot of way, and we
Yeah.
just want to create, and we want to capture and just embrace and bring people in. And so it gets greatly challenging, because yeah, I feel like I could dance and give dance and show dance and do dance and all the other stuff I do, and if I never got paid, but as long as God set it up that my basic needs were met, yeah.
Praise
How
God.
realistic is that? No, probably not, because I have bills, right?
Right. 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 We all
And
do.
I have a family.
Right.
Right? And so I think, one, you never give up on what you believe your calling, your dream, and your purpose is. And I think you always continuously engage God in what that is and what that should look like.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I also think sometimes there are going to be moments where it's not going to just, you're going to find, like, I'm almost in a space that you don't really know which way maybe you should go,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you have to think out what's the logical
Hmm.
thing to do sometimes,
Hmm.
over what you believe God is having you to do, right? And so in that way, you might not get a lot of support,
Hmm.
right? Because most people want you to be dot your I's, cross your T's, have it all planned out, have it all mapped out. But for most people that I know that have done what they fully believe that God has called them to do, it never was greatly mapped out. It was
Right.
never it never really lined up. It came as a miraculous happening in the midst of, like you hear Tyler Perry living in his car,
Right,
in
right.
the midst of Oprah Winfrey having the struggles and the tragedies she's had as a
Mhm,
child.
mhm, mhm.
For me, I've never just, there are those, I'm sure, but it always seems like there's this wrestling that takes place.
Mhm.
That am I gonna do what the world expects me to do and have it to look like the world expects me to do, or I'm gonna step out on what God calls, He uses those foolish things to
Right,
confine the wise.
exactly,
And I think when you're in that place, then you're in a place where God would have you to be,
exactly,
because it goes from a mind thing to your heart, right?
exactly, exactly,
And I think again it comes with having the support, having people that believe and trust the God that is in you, that's saying, you know what, I'm going to help you, I'm going to help support you through this
mhm,
at this
mhm,
time.
exactly,
Because a lot of times I felt like I was a lone ranger because people didn't understand, and it's not going to make sense to people, and
exactly,
I'm going to sound and look crazy. Why wouldn't you just do this or do that? And so I think having a strong support, even if it's just one other person,
exactly, exactly,
that says, you know what, I trust and believe, not you, but I trust and believe the God in you.
exactly,
And I'm going to walk with you along this. And we're going to go trusting God all the way. Because I really feel like it's putting your faith into action. And it may not line up exactly the way you envision or thought or hope, so you can show everybody, see, I told you God was going to do it. It may not be that, but God is still going to show up, and I believe meet every need, especially when you're doing it for God, right?
exactly, exactly,
I never have had God fail me. I have been into some low spaces and places in my life, but I've
mhm,
always rebounded. I've always came back greater and stronger, as a person and in my identity and
mhm,
my calling and my purpose when that did happen. But, we live in this world, and especially if you live in New York, it's not cheap.
right,
um I think if you can put some things, because sometimes you do have that space to be able to plan and get yourself together and do some things,
right,
always try to do that. But then there are those times where nothing's making sense and it's just not all working out, and then you're going to have to lean in and on your faith like you've never done before.
right.
And
And
that's what I
I think those times when things aren't always working out, that's also a time to pay attention to what what God is trying to say in those moments too. Because I think we tend to think when everything's going good, oh, this is it. But God moves in different ways, and it's not always going to be where everything is perfect. And, I feel like in order for us to evolve and progress, you have to get uncomfortable sometimes, facing fears and doing things like so, and it's like that's a part of the journey. Because if everything was set out and you knew everything, what's the experience? How do you grow?
Exactly. I think it's in those challenging of times, like many of us are finding ourselves in now, that you really start to evolve, you really start to grow, and you really start to discern again what's really important.
Right.
A lot of us are looking at what's really important. Like you're taking you're sort of remembering and looking back at some things that happened in your life to get you to this space right here. And you're living in a time now where, people are dying all around you,
Mhm. Mhm.
and none of us know when it's going to be for us. And so, you sort of have to ask yourself a question like, if I'm to continue to live now, what is it that I would be doing? What is that purpose, that calling, that thing that's just me, that I feel like is my destiny, feels like I'm supposed to do that?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's where I think a lot of us are. And I think a lot of us are starting to learn that there were more gifts and stuff in us than we knew we had,
Mhm.
right? Because we weren't challenged to look at them and bring them up, because everything was sort of handed to us and given to us. And so now we're in a space you have to create and recreate things for yourself.
Mhm.
And one of those things is how you understand yourself in the here and now on the earth, and how you want to continue that living legacy
Right.
as long as God gives you the opportunity to do that.
It's true. That's so
Yeah.
true. It's true. Um, Now, for those who may be scared of failure, because it's one thing you realize, you know what, I have to step out and walk in faith, and then it takes time to do that. But for those who may be scared of failure, like, well, if I do this thing, what if I don't succeed? and especially for people who they may not be surrounded or in a place in their life where they have people that do support them. They may not even have one person around them, but they know within themselves that God is saying, you have to do this. How can they find encouragement?
So one is, I think, if it's fear, if you clear that you're feared, then that's not of God. So
Exactly.
you have to own that for yourself, that might be the impetus, or that might be the thing that's letting you know you're supposed to go that way, because you understand that fear is trying to block you from doing that.
Right.
Because God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but of love and a sound mind. And fear really has to do a lot of times with how you're failing to understand yourself, how you're failing to acknowledge who God is in you,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
So that means for me that you need to do some continuous work on yourself. So that means for me that you would need to engage in like spiritual disciplines. You need to continuously read God's word and read other sacred texts and books that are going to help you to understand who you are. You might, if you don't have anybody, then you might need to invest in a spiritual coach or guide,
Right.
or program to help you to get through some of that stuff, because you need to get to a place where you have to understand what is the fear. And of course, none of us want to fail.
Exactly.
But the truth is, we don't even know if we're going to fail if we don't try, right? So we're already putting it up there, and nothing and nobody's telling us that. It may seem outlandish, it may seem whatever, but we're really projecting that kind of image out there. We're not even having a clue that that's going to happen. It's just like a nature to us, like, self-doubting ourselves, self-doubting the God that we serve. And so fear to me really is not of God. Fear is something that we have to wrestle with, but we have to tackle it aggressively, and we have to rise above it, because I think that is the main reason why a lot of people do not get to their calling and their purpose and their gifts, because of that fear. They don't have the security within themselves. And then again, not having any kind of outside support and community is big.
True.
Everybody needs some kind of little cheerleader.
That's right.
In a sense, some kind of cheerleading, because we are human, and we do long for that. And we do sort of want that confirmation that it's going to be okay.
Exactly.
That confirmation. So if someone is somewhat of a loner, I would say invest in yourself if you can. That's one of the things I had to do, because like being the first in my family with this, a lot of things they didn't understand what I was going through.
Right.
And they didn't get it. But I've always invested in spiritual or life coaches or therapists and stuff to really invest in myself, because I had to get to a place where I understand this is not for everybody.
Right.
Everybody's not going to understand. And I don't fully understand it, but I'm clear that God has something for me to do. And so I had to find that support for myself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's true. Even I know for entertainers, and even myself being a musician, one of the things you have to get over or try to push through is fear of being on stage. And the only way, I remember someone told me when I first started doing gigs and trying to get out there, and someone told me the only way to get over being nervous is to do it anyway.
Right.
Because that's
Right.
it. I mean, that's it. You can't,
Right.
you just have to do it. And I
Right.
realized, and I remember listening to this gentleman, this is just a random musician that I met. I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, is that the only way? But, and sometimes that nervousness or that fear of that thing doesn't always go away. But I think what the key is you kind of learn how to work within that and still be mobile inside of that anyway. You're not letting it stop you.
Right. And
So
a little bit of fear is good.
exactly.
It's healthy, because you don't want to get so boastful and get so high up there that, you want confidence, but you don't want to be, so overconfident that you feel so like boastful. You still have to keep sort of a humble posture. So
Exactly.
again, I think the key thing you said is not to let it overtake you.
Exactly.
Understand that, this is new. This is a little nerving, a little fearful, but it's okay. It's a good kind of fear that lets me know I'm in the right place, doing the right thing, and I'm gonna accomplish. I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna do it. So that way it's good. But if you use it to cripple you,
Mm.
no, that's not good.
No.
That's not applied to me. Yeah.
What is one of the biggest things you would like everyone watching today,
Yeah.
listening, to take away from this message of understanding their purpose or God's calling on their life that they might need to tap into if they haven't already?
Ooh, I would say what's helped me the most to navigate through, well, it was several things, but one of the main things, and I'm going to say that again because I was mainly a loner,
Mm-hmm.
and I took pride in that in some ways, but when I really think about it, having again some kind of support system, meaning even if you have to make it for yourself, pay someone to help to guide you and lead you on the way, I think you need to do that. I think you need to always stay open
Mm-hmm.
that within your calling and purpose, it can evolve and grow and begin to look different. It's not going to necessarily stay the same exact way it was when you first embarked on that journey. So
Exactly.
be open to that and do your own personal work. You know, this is about hard work. This is about you lining up with God and allowing God really fully into your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you have to engage God though.
Yes.
It's not enough, I feel, just to go on a Sunday morning. It's not even enough just to partake in Bible study and something. You have to pray on your own and for
Yeah.
yourself. You
Read.
have to fast sometimes.
Yes.
You have to read the word for yourselves. You have to turn off the TV. You have to shut out some of the outside noise. You don't need to tell everybody everything about you sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes you got to just own and embrace some things as you and your own personal time with God. And that to me is something that we didn't used to take a lot of time to do because everybody's so busy and we trying to do church and get ministries and everything running, and we got to do this and do that. But now we have no excuses.
Right.
And no excuses. And so once this is over, however it is over and ends, I think people should hold on to that time of being able to retreat,
Mm.
go within and engage God at a deeper level, at a level that maybe you've never done before.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say.
Well, thank you so much, Pastor Leslie, for being a part of this. I mean, this
Thank
was
you.
a blessing, a blessing. And thank you
Thank
everyone to tuning in to Real Conversations with Sheree. Be blessed, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.